From the Annual Association for the Study of Gifted People, we want to welcome in this second round of international conferences to our next speaker. We will be talking about the consequences of no identification in this set of conferences. But now I'd like to introduce you to José Manuel Martínez Domínguez. He's a PhD in pedagogy, holds a degree in philosophy, coordinates the FERSA research group of the University Rey Juan Carlos in Madrid, and has published articles and books. His conference will deal around sensitive education, specifically within COVID-19 framework. Hello, my name is José Manuel Martínez. I'm a researcher and professor in the University Rey Juan Carlos in Madrid. And until not very long ago, I was working in certain educational center in Gran Canaria, Las Palmas de Gran Canaria, the place where I come from. And then in Madrid, that is where I've been living for a long time. One of our research lines in the FERSA group in the Juan Carlos Primero University, Rey Juan Carlos University, is sensitive intelligence and sensitive education. And this is what I want to share with you today. I want to show you also the book, if you want to go deeper into this topic, the book that has been published recently on sensitive education. And we can go further on this spectrum or framework of development of the person. The first thing we have to think about is that intelligence is nothing new, and sensitive intelligence is nothing new. It's just that we need to differentiate between human intelligence, that it's sensitive intelligence itself, to what artificial intelligence is, or animal or instinctive intelligence are. Is it true that animals have sensitivity? Yes, of course, the same way as plants have it, and we have that sensitivity too. Even machines can have that artificial sensitivity that helps them interact with the environment. But we have the three-dimension sensitivity that has been acknowledged for thousands of years, many thousands of years before Christ. It's nothing innovative. What could be innovative is the concept of sensitive intelligence, a concept that is not only limited to the rational dimension, to the IQ, to the Q factor. It also includes the knowledge around sensitiveness in these three dimensions that were already known in older ages, in very old times, when we talk about body, mind, and opening. In the Middle East, in the Near East, in the Greek world, the Roman world, the Latin world, and then in the Western world, where we started talking about body, soul, and spirit. And it's happened that with modern science, the concept of intelligence was very difficult to frame within these three parameters. And we considered, out of Cartesian or Newtonian principles, where seeing the reality as a mechanism, that is the cosmos, we tried to understand intelligence as body and mind. And here comprise Descartes, Kant philosophies, and they somehow limit us. They do try to progress in knowledge, but they, on the other side, seem to be leaving things aside. They were losing some relevance in science, and at some point, some authors started looking for science of the spirit, to try to differentiate that there is a difference between nature sciences. But that was a bit left aside. Existentialism, phenomenology seemed to progress a little bit, or it was developed in that area, or from the the humanistic psychology that little by little has tried to be more and more empiric with the positive psychology, but it doesn't seem to find its roots as an empiric concept. We want to talk about the spirit from the scientific point of view, and we talk about an opening to try to eliminate all those additional elements that have no connection with science, that non-rational knowledge that can sometimes be associated to the spirit and that can make the scientific community reject it. But every person, when is being educated and when is receiving an upbringing, is aware that they have a sensitiveness in their bodies to heat, to humidity, like plants, but also to another type of sensitivity. We empathize with that synergy as we do as other animals do, a dog with its owner. But as humans, we have an additional sensitivity that allows us to help, that we have been created, that there is a feeling, there's a meaning, and we're sensitive to that question of what am I doing here? Where do I come from? Where am I going? Questions that thinkers of the oldest times already made themselves. And this is not a sensitivity that animals have. Animals don't ask themselves about this sense, or they don't have that desire for the world to progress as a mature, solidary humanity. They don't have this holistic vision. And it's this sensitive intelligence, the one that allows us to have a global knowledge of the whole reality. But the modern concept of intelligence has been going deeper into the most specific elements. And from the IQ that seemed a little uncomfortable for education, we moved towards concepts that could be arguable, whether they are intelligences, emotional intelligence. We could talk about it as an ability, as an emotional ability, rather than an intelligence, something that is developed depending also on our intelligence. We talk about multiple intelligences that are talents, maybe competences, multiple competences. And it seems to be more comfortable to talk about competences rather than intelligences. They're easier to measure, to develop, to handle. But we need to think about sensitive intelligence, because every person has a certain thing given. And this load of capacities is not only in our mind and our body, but also in our opening. As Ortega said, would have said, I am myself and my circumstances. A person is not just their body and their mind. It's also connected with an environment. And this is the sensitive intelligence, realizing that as well as myself, it's us. It's always about us. And the development of the self is connected to the prosperity of the us. That we're a mature us, not a fake us, not an us that hurts us. And we only achieve this if we work together, because sometimes we separate this. We talk about intelligence, personality, relations. No, there's a unbreakable connection. And this is the distinction that we make. We can adapt like plants, that sensitivity that allows us to develop and to get used to, and that sensitivity that allows us to take as our own what we originally are. And if we have never explored this opening, we cannot make it our own, or we can take as our own what it doesn't belong to us, and that's violence, stealing. We could be arguing whether eating somebody else's body is cannibalism. Well, taking their mind or their opening, it would be a cannibalism, affective cannibalism, psychological cannibalism. we use others, we manipulate others, and in this sense, we realize that there are people with different degrees of sensitive intelligence. And we cannot bring all the people or educate all people as if we all had the same sensitive intelligence. It doesn't mean that having a high or low sensitive intelligence is good or bad. What is important is to educate each person according to their sensitive intelligence. And IQ and sensitive intelligence degree doesn't necessarily be aligned. Having a low IQ can limit your development, but having a low sensitive intelligence doesn't limit yourself. It's just that I manage my intelligence without being too much affected by what's outside, which allows me to do a lot without suffering. But my lack of sensitivity can lead me to harm others. The person with high sensitive intelligence doesn't necessarily be superior, but it perceives more perception, can feel overwhelmed, can feel as a problem, can suffer more. But it's also a great gift that allows us to detect things that another person with a lower sensitive intelligence would not even consider. It's a different way of facing reality, and every one of us has to be educated in a different way according to their sensitive intelligence. And this is what I want to share. That the educational system should adapt to this. I always thought that the mechanism, modernity, blocked this education in science and limited us to a rationalist, voluntarist model where the thought and the reasoning was the great power, the god of science, of will, the great executor of the human being. The human being is the absolute power of doing and undoing. But if we go deeper into the history of education, we know that until the 5th century, this was the normal thing. This spiritual dimension was treated as something normal because Homo sapiens is sapiens when started to showing its spirit through dancing, music, painting, art. Because they were aware that suddenly that their reality was immense, was non-finite, and it was acknowledging an origin that they hadn't given themselves before, and it was a wonderful thing to realize that there was more than just my body and my mind. But when rationalizing, the human being started trying to explain rational explanations to everything. Even the Greek already start there. They go from mythos to logo, and they try to reason everything rationally and to control reality or will, leading educational systems to be very moralistic, very traditionalist, and very dogmatic. Even though then the people who try to open themselves to the spiritual, to the new things, to go what goes further to the mind, they talk about irrational thoughts, ignorant, non-cultural, not wise, not superstitious, fanatic, fundamentalistic, dogmatic. Everyone who tries not to be blocked in the Newtonian and Cartesian science is considered to be non-rational and esoteric. But we have realized that it's a mechanicist cosmovision that is not aligned to the population in the world. Most populations in the world have a cosmovision, an open anthropology, a sensitive education. But in the Western countries, we have gone to the parameters of the empiric science as if they were unique truths. And they're provisional temporary truths, that they can be false. The science cannot say, I have shown this, I have proven this. No, well, I have proven, this has been proven until now. Science gives us a very deep, very powerful, very specific knowledge, but always open to transformation, to change that comes from that human dimension that without realizing we can make smaller. From this vision of the plus ultra, because it would be the non-plus ultra of the modern science, that would be, we would have a rude education, but not rude as itself, but as a non-sensitive education. And there are people with high sensitivity that cannot live in this world because they perceive in their spiritual sensitivity that there's a bit more, that we're not just materialized elements, that there is injustice in the world, and I cannot just be non-sensitive to this. And their own spirit, their own heart, as we tend to call this dimension, is nothing to do with will. It's not the loving of the willing. It's those intuitions, that living from the heart, with a deeper knowledge than reasoning itself. Pascal was saying it. My heart has reasons that my reasoning doesn't understand. So people with high sensitivity have their heart there, very much exposed, and they suffer the impact of an unfair world. Because even though science is progressing very much, and so is humanity, there is still a lot of violence and lack of justice. And sometimes those people live out, they cannot adapt themselves. But the problem is not that they cannot adapt themselves. Maybe we have to think, should the world change? Someone who doesn't adapt to violence, do they have a problem? Well, I think that violence is the problem, not these people. And we have to be thankful to these sensitive people that realize that this can't go on like this. People dying in the Mediterranean just as it is? No. There can't be just people without a job. We can't just have violence of all sorts around us, and that we get used to it. This lack of adaptation of these people is healthy. That's why I consider that sensitive intelligence is a quality. It's not a pathology, it's not a disorder, and we should not do that for that. We should not consider that this person has a disorder. This person needs a medication. No way. Needs therapy. No. Needs to decrease their sensitivity? No. What I have to do is to teach them, manage their sensitivity so they don't suffer more than necessary. And then we can put it at the service of the community. We understand this is a development potential, and we understand that we all have a potential and we can measure. There's researchers who measure the intelligence, the traditional intelligence, the IQ. That's a very much rooted concept, it's a very serious concept, but that is only used for diagnosis. But then there's other researchers like Ellen Aron that have been developing other concepts to measure intelligence regarding to sensitiveness. And this is another indicator, leads us to another indicator that's very interesting, and it takes us to another Gauss belt. There are people with a high sensitivity, low sensitivity, and standard sensitivity, and that is combined with intelligence. So we're talking about a first human factor in each of us that we have to develop. And this is developed in an environment, in a family, in a school, and with an attitude that this person has. And this is what scientists do. How can we help to develop their development potential? But we have forgotten that this potential has a reason. There's a reason behind it, because it comes from an originality, from an act of being. And every person has to find in their world their own knowledge. And this is what we call uniqueness. And this development potential is interesting because it's unique. We don't want to limit their environment so that they develop their potential to the maximum. Well, it would be great that they could develop as much as they can to become unique and to be the best version of themselves, but not to be overwhelmed because they have to develop everything because one's telling me to develop this and that and that. And we're convinced that sensitive education will allow us to discover what we are designed to give to the world, so we become a present to the world, the same way as the world would be a present to the person. So I invite people for sensitive education. It's open to educate in property. It's originality. It's uniqueness. We're not imitating. Of course, there are mirror brain cells, and we imitate, but we don't only imitate. We also interpret, depending from where we come from, and we keep those things that resounds deep inside, things that we feel identified, things that make us unique. Creating this best option of myself, but I don't build myself over nothing. I don't start from nothing, from scratch. I discover an origin, and this is a root. This is the origin because it's based on your origins. It's not just any construction. It's a unique construction of myself, of my being, turning myself into a mature self. This gives lots of peace, strength, and develops a solid, firm personality, which is also flexible and open to the world, and allows us to live in harmony, even when we're not the same. We're different, but we're not uniform. We're connected in our uniqueness. A sensitive education is the one that guarantees the originality of each person, making a mature us, where we're all equal with the same development opportunities to develop our uniqueness. When we close education to the mental limit, we don't let the heart go further. We don't open ourselves to the heart, to the spirit. We go to that non plus ultra. If you go further than the mind, there's nothing. You'll just fall. So what a paradox, isn't it? In the geographical world, there was a Copernicus time. There was a change from that flat world vision to a round vision. In the psychological world, we also saw this paradigm where we had the cosmic vision, and then suddenly we lose this cosmic vision, and now we are in a flat education with flat competencies. The problem comes again, as I said, to try to train everyone, to educate everyone as we were in artificial intelligence, all the same, all equal. Yes, we do all need competencies, but we need them from our uniqueness. We're not going just to be competent and functional, because being non-functional is a problem. But it's not only important to be functional, because a thief can perfectly live functionally for their own interest and die being a thief. It's not just important to be functional, but it's also beautiful. We want to be pretty in the inside, to be mature, to have a mature functionality. So I can do my Rubik Cube, taking the stickers away. That's functional. Okay, yes, I did the Rubik Cube, but inside it's not done. It's been a functional solution, but not mature. Well, sometimes the educational system develops smart people. They find there's individual selves that compete against each other to be more powerful and to use the others. And that's a pity, because that's not our essence. Our calling is to be interdependent, to feel that we can give a lot, but that we also need others. And that's where we can I can work as a functional person. And that's where sensitive education leads us to. We can abandon our mental limits without fear, because sensitive intelligence places us in our heart, in our uniqueness, and we can call this our inner home. When we're not in our inner home, we live in mental refuge, or emotional refuge, but they don't last for long. Safe home, that operational basis that is safe, that is strong, it's essential, that base camp, to reach the peak. So people with high capacities, with high sensitivity, need to find their safe haven, their safe home to live that adventure of reaching the highest peak. But if they don't have this base camp, this leads them to get lost in the way, not knowing how to go back. And when one doesn't know how to get back, it just is like homeless, and this produces huge suffering. And they're diagnosed with anxiety, with depression, and other types of disorders. That is not fair, because what they've had is not an internal disorder. It's an educational problem. They haven't been helped to develop their whole sensitive potential. And this is because our perception, our civilization has trapped themselves in their technology, in their scientific knowledge, and this doesn't let them go further to what they empirically know and understand. And it generates this non plus ultra. And this gives us type of safety and security, and we can live our rights, our freedoms within this frame, this cage, with a very materialistic cage, based on the economy, and allows a social agreement. You have rights and you have obligations, but please stay within the limits. Originality is only allowed within that playground. Like in the first picture, I can move freely without hurting others, being very safe, and the most I can do is maybe decorate my cars, maybe get a water gun or a screen, watch some films, so I don't get bored. And see how I can be creative, but not too creative, not out of that play area. And then there will be collectives that say, come on, let's make that playground bigger, let's increase our rights and obligations, but the consideration is the same, it's closed. It's a fake us, because it doesn't let us open us to our uniqueness, to this originality, and the essential engine is fear. We've seen it in the pandemic. Everything's going to be a reason to be afraid of. We're going to aim at safety, 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 and control. And there's an educational problem, because there's a clash between educating for freedom and educating for equality. Because we've lost that third essential element, that was fraternity. Equality, fraternity, liberty. They're connected, and if we eliminate fraternity, opening of yourself, equality and freedom seem to get further apart and are opposed. So we need to get that sensitive intelligence back, educated, so that giving us away is not losing ourselves. Giving, it's a natural desire that takes us in our intimacy. It's a desire as natural as eating in human beings. And we need to educate for that healthy self-egocentrism of eating, sleeping, resting. If we don't feed ourselves, if we don't look after ourselves, we cannot give. But we should all be aware of this desire to give, and let alone people with high emotional sensitivity. Because when we educate them that we are essentially selfish, that we are a wolf to ourselves, and we cannot be virtuous, that we only live because there's a social pact. It's a pity. It's a very sad vision of the education that does not believe in the wonders of emotional intelligence and of sensitive intelligence, and that does not allow us to get together in a way in love, in a mature love, that it's open without being afraid of giving yourself, because giving ourselves to the us doesn't sacrifice myself, because when I'm giving it to I'm giving it to myself, I'm giving it to us. When I play in a team and I score a goal, it's not only my goal, it's not only the front player making scoring that goal, but I'm a defense and I'm sacrificing myself for the team. But I'm helping the team win, so I win with the team. Everyone in our place, we are winning while sacrificing ourselves. And we understand this with sensitive intelligence. And people with high sensitive intelligence, they are sufferers because they realize. And if they don't educate, they give themselves all constantly. And if they're not educated properly, their heart gets broken because they see how others take too much from them, because they also need to learn how to receive, how to develop this healthy egocentrism, that because it's not bad in itself, we need to train it, we have to educate it. If we're in a plane, there's a decompression of the cabin pressure. The first thing they say, please place your mask before you help anyone else. Because if you go and help someone else without putting yours on, you can faint and then not be able to help anyone else. So please think of yourself, oxygenate yourself, and then save the rest. This is what the healthy egocentric people. And this is produced in the open civilization where rights and obligations and freedoms are our own. I don't want more freedoms and rights than the ones that are mine, originally mine, and society has enough sensitivity to perceive the variety that we have in our people, the people composing it. Inclusive education, it's a special education. And that difference, inclusive and special education as separate elements, is just mechanism and nominalism. Because all education should be special and inclusive. And then we should have all that maturity to organize ourselves technically in the most appropriate way so that everyone receives the original education in the best way. And we can organize the groups depending on the groups and levels and ages. We consider this education as very welcoming. Like hospital or jail education. Let's change this paradigm, this closed paradigm. And let's use this world that has been open to us. Let's make it evolve. Let's open to those progress that makes us more human, more open. Let's make trust. Let's help us trust people. Well, within the three conditions that are basis to the potential of the development potential, we have these first factors that, of course, we need competencies. Yeah, that's clear. But as other authors say, that there are still authors who are working on character-based education, and unfortunately there seems to be a fight between education based in character and in competences. But there are dimensions of one same reality. We need competent people and people with a good temper, with a good character. If we have competent people without those roots, those competences will just fall at the first storm. But if we only have people with a strong temper, with a strong character, with few competences, they cannot grow. They will not be mature people. They will not be complete. So we need both things, and for that we need to educate from the trunk, from sensibility, from sensitivity. So sometimes we think we need to have a very strong trunk. No, what it makes them strong is the roots and then some good competences. A palm tree, for example, in Haiti, can stand a storm, a thunderstorm. It's not a matter of having a very thick trunk. If it does, probably the storm will just break that tree. Sensitivity has to be flexible, small, subtle, can stand the greatest storms. That's why we can't compare. Is it better to have high sensitivity or low sensitivity? It really depends on the environment, on the circumstances, and thinking on the self, on us, and thinking in richness and educating people depending on their development potential. But that potential for development will actually develop, will grow. The personal potential, I mean, will develop very much depending on the environment condition of the self, of perceiving their specific characteristic capacities, feeling part, having the opportunity to develop their own competencies, not competing, but competing with ourselves to try to get the best of us and helping everyone be part and contribute. Family, community, school, leisure areas in digital world. I and us, that lets us live in our inner home. As Matlock would say, to self-perform ourselves. This is a factor that connects us to uniqueness, that allows us to have the appropriate concept, because if we are well perceived, we have a healthy identity because we feel that we belong to us, and we are confident because people trust, and we are efficient because we can make mistakes. There's no problem with that. I'm aware of what I can deliver, what my gifts and my talents are, because I can be part. I've been given that opportunity, and these factors are essential. And education is locked into a content. Parents seem to have parents want our kids to develop their capacities to the maximum. The legislation says this educational system will develop to the maximum the capacities of the student. That maximum development, come on, but what for? To the maximum? Why? I could also write with my foot. Would I not be able to write just because I'm doing it with my foot? And why would you want to write with your foot? Well, that's exactly my question. Why do I want to develop to the maximum my possibilities? Why would I have to want to live with anxiety because I can't speak German, Chinese, Japanese, I can't play the guitar, I can't write with my feet? Oh no, I've got so many competences lacking. But why would I want all the competences in the world? I only need to develop those that allow me to be the best version of myself, in a mature self where we help each other. But at the end, behind that willingness to develop to the maximum my competences, we seem to mistrust the rest, to mistrust the world. It's either I do it or nobody else is going to help me, and I have to be above everyone else. We don't trust them. That's what's moving this mistrust world. But if we can learn to work as a team, we can have a happy education, we can mature, we can develop a healthy way where people feel fulfilled and not doing what others insist in you being. Well, changing the paradigm. We think that normal people have a level of sensitiveness and competences, and those who are too sensitive or too active, they have an excess. And then we need to clip those excesses because they break normality. They hurt the person and they hurt the group. But why? Why don't we respect people as they are? And we tell them that those who don't reach that normality, they have lack and they're not good people. Well, no, their sensitiveness, their lack of sensitiveness makes them not realize that they are hurting others, but we can teach them. And if once they're educated and they're aware, if they're doing it voluntarily, then we can tell them they're not good. But because we're educating them in a standard sensitivity, we tend to think that people who go above that level, they're autistic or Asperger, and we seem to label them as a qualification to justify something that is not wrong, that is not right, and it's unfair. Of course, there are certain indicators that lead us to think or to know that there are people with ADHD or autistic spectrum people or any other disorder that we can diagnose with a clinical point of view. But an excess or a lack doesn't necessarily need to be clinically labeled. Normality is to be diverse, to be varied. In this way, sensitive intelligence has to be perceived not only in the traditional rationality, has to be the rational capacity has also got to be assessed. The style, depending on the character they have, depending whether they are more extrovert or less extrovert. That sensitivity towards negative sides, people who tend to be fearful, to get angry, or to feel some kind of disgust. And that's considered a negative side. And the negative element, well, look, that this person that has a cheerful character is very lucky. Yes, okay, but those people who are always happy have a problem, because if I have a person next to me who is suffering and you're still happy, you have a problem. Well, thanks to those people who are sensitive to sadness and to injustice, we can grow. And that is also, those characters are also important, and they're not disordered characters, they're just sensitive. That capacity to control their effort and affiliation as essential clue. Kids live in an attachment, sometimes in an insecure attachment, and maybe not necessarily because the family is not functional, but because the person is very sensitive. Maybe an argument at home with lack of sensitivity that doesn't hurt them, but a person with high sensitivity can feel a problem at home. So parents have to be very much aware of their sensitivity, their kids' sensitivity. Just say, don't worry, we're not angry, we're just had an emotional outburst that is not very relevant. Don't you worry, we will need to learn how to talk with their sensitive kids since the early age, so that they don't feel insecure attachment. And everyone in their personality, they need to learn to be mature. This means that I can give and take. Sometimes in the lack of maturity, people can't give. And they're focused on the external side. And some others are not capable of receiving. And they're also immature. Maturity will give us that feeling of being able to give and take. In this conversation, this conference, we cannot go into much further detail, but knowing that there are people with this sensitivity, with this thought, this deep thought, this strong emotions, empathy, sensitivity to detail, and that very often Dabrowski acknowledges this overexcitability, not only emotional, but also an understanding of the reasons and sources that generate these questions. Because a person with a high sensitive intelligence not only knows something about something specific, a lot about something, but they have a holistic capacity to relate and a holistic knowledge and they also have a strong intuition. Highly sensitive, highly intuitive people suffer a lot. Intuition is inside those people who are not rational, those healers, as if they were not scientific. And intuition is nothing more than that high sensitive intelligence that takes me to feel that behind the mountain there's smoke as well as clouds. So that person with high intuition understands that there's a fire behind that mountain, and the rest of the people will say, "Oh, come on, why are you saying that? They're just ghosts." But that person is blamed as being conspiranoic and imaginative, but at some point there's fire. The fire arrives, and that person with high sensitivity feels guilty because this person knew there was fire behind that mountain, and nothing. They didn't do anything, but they didn't do anything because they called them crazy. That nobody listened to them, and not acknowledging that there are people who have a high intuition, nothing to do with gifts or special powers, just a higher sensitivity, intelligence, or just a higher sensitivity, a higher intelligence to develop, to spot realities. They're not better or worse, they just have a high sensitivity that makes them suffer very much. They need help. We shouldn't be blaming them for trying to help the rest. If they're introvert, they can feel anxiety, or they can be more irritable, they can be hostile, they clash with the environment. Well, being aware of that sensitive imagination that leads us to solving problems. There are many possibilities of those things that can happen, but won't happen. And we need to help these people to develop also their expressiveness. But in this sensitive expressiveness, in our society, we don't value that. What do you produce? Art? We're not interested in your art. The problem is not your art. The problem is that there's a lack of literacy, of artistic literacy, a lack of spiritual literacy, a lack of opening literacy, because you're doing says nothing to me because I don't understand the symbolic language. I thought that was for kids, illiterate people. They talk about symbols. I speak 3 languages, or I'm a programmer, but you don't speak the global holistic language, the one that all cultures speak, the language of art. And our education has to come to terms with art, with beauty, with symbolism, to be able to develop high sensitive intelligence. And this education that compresses that sensitive intelligence, it's like putting an eagle in amongst the hens. Oh, if you put them there with the hens, no, the eagle is not going to have any problems with living with the hens. But growing up amongst the hens, she's going to learn that she has to be afraid of the wolf, and she's going to be a hen that damages other hens. She's going to be impulsive hen, but it's not a violent hen. It's just that the educational system has imposed a violence on this eagle because hasn't allowed them to develop their own uniqueness. And this also happens in families or in schools. Come on, eagle, what were you expecting? You cannot develop as an eagle if you were educated in a system where our uniqueness and our creativity has been suppressed in order to adapt to the world and not suffering what others have suffered. But don't you realize that you're educating your kids in your resentfulness, in the damage you've suffered, and instead of educating them in love? I don't want my kid to suffer what I have suffered. Well, we're educating them in fear. Think about it again. How do you have to educate that eagle to be original, unique? We we are in an educational system where we're all vehicles who can go, but there's someone, a sensitive person, exceptionally sensitive person, but it's a plane, and we tell them, okay, at least behave as if you were a bus. But then we see, oh, come on, you've got wings. Let's go to the doctor and see if we can cut those wings because you've got a disruptive character. We take the wings off the plane, and it does adapt to the world, but it's a clumsy plane because deep inside, that plane knows that they can fly, but has had to adapt to a rolling world. And then we ask ourselves, why is it depressed? Why does it have anxiety? We've helped them. No, we haven't helped them. We have clipped their wings. We have prevented them from developing their uniqueness. We need to help teachers understand that maybe you have mostly motorbikes, maybe you yourself are a motorbike, but you might have a student who is a plane. Don't feel bad that they can do things that you can't. Don't compare to them. Don't feel humiliated because your students may know more than you in certain areas. Don't feel bad because you need to go out of that planned schedule curriculum because your students take you out of it. That's the problem of the educational system because it damages the sensitive intelligence because then they tell these kids that they need pills, and that's unfair. But as well, in addition, those people who discover that they can fly, they're different. Hey, I've got high capacities, woohoo, I can fly. And then they try to carry lots of people. But no, that person might feel different, even different to those who also have high capacities. Oh, come on, I have to carry lots of people and I have to take them very far. No, you have high capacities to rescue people in a cliff, for example, to take people from one building to another. Nobody else can do that, just you. But that person is suffering because it's said that all people with high capacities are the same. There's no two people with high capacities that are the same. They are all unique, like everybody else. Those are labels we're labeling. They can be very useful for scientists, for doctors, but reality is much richer than this. And we need to help people to find their own uniqueness. And we've got experts in pedagogy that discovered it many times ago. Montessori was a pioneer in this. And she said that we need to let kids free to develop their originality and to be aware that what's important is to be unique. And this didn't involve that she also pushed them a bit from the outside. Many interpretations have been made about Montessori. Montessori had a high spirituality, high uniqueness, originality, opening. This sensitive intelligence is all in all acknowledging that I am I and I am us. I don't only focus in this individuality, that I don't always educate in this collectiveness, I educate uniqueness in mature us. And this involves that the person has an internal home that is open to their best version. What we could say that it's apotheosic. What was apotheosic in the Greek world? Well, when a hero was so heroic, it became a god. It was considered a god. It was a semi-god. Apotheosis is becoming a god. It was also done to the Roman emperors. They went through underneath the Arc of the Triumph because they became gods. They were part of the gods. Well, human being is also called to be gods for this sensitive intelligence. Animals don't want to become gods, but we seem to be called for that. It's like our essential goal. For millions of years, we have it in our hearts. We call God whatever you want to call God. Living with all sorts of pleasures, living with all sorts of powers. The people clap at me, applaud, they glorify me. that people consider me a god in football, in the show, in art, in the business. We seem to have that as an essential goal to dominate my own life, to dominate my own existence. And also in the spirit and the different religions, we see our desire to become God or kids of God, children of God. That apotheosis is present in all cultures. And this becoming gods by the you is something that we consider, but it's not trapped inside a culture. It's the encounter between different cultures. It helps us develop this self-realization of the self. We know we have to find who we want to be, who we have to be, and that creation, that need to create, doesn't involve adapting to the environment, the pressure of my uniqueness. I feel pressure everywhere, and that pressure can lead me to go to pleasure, to be hedonistic or in success, to find a refuge in a God that gives everything is given to me in solidarity to save the world. Let's see if I'm happy that way. But at some point, that people with high sensitivity, they realize there's stereotypes, there are false elements, that there's violence, there's seduction. But it's not all this. Of course, we have to have positive emotions. Of course, we have to have some power. Of course, we have to be open to spirit, but with a creation, a tension that creates, open to my internal home, towards that apotheosis. And this is what we call nocicentric and synergy. And we are educating against the flow. They are transforming their environment. They're feeding from their environment. And I will come to an end. Some signs of people with a high intelligence, sensitive intelligence. What can we do? Well, we can promote them to work freely. Please reduce the screen time. Screens reduce the time, our development. When I play, I can bring what I have inside outside, and screens get the outside into myself. Let them flow. Let them their inner river flow. Let's not push them. Let's not create dams. Let it flow. And that's the educational system that should allow us to flow. Kinchugi would also mention this. Let's aim for a safe attachment, secure attachment. Let's give support to families. Please, educational systems should not push for more technology. That is cheaper than helping families. Those early educators that are parents, let's help them do their share in education. Let's help them have functional families. That's something we cannot give at schools. Let's people help heal those internal wounds. They are sensitive people. Talking about this metaphor of this Kinchugi, this Japanese technique that when something breaks to pieces and they repair them, they stick them together with a golden, special golden glue that makes them stronger and more beautiful. Living in a dialogue between parents and teachers and students with authenticity and transparency, sensitive intelligence people. They spot lies. It stinks. Lies stink. They can't stand it, and they suffer very much when they face it. We have to be more honest, more truthful, more transparent. Let's not take double sense, hiding our reality, our authenticity. Let's strengthen will. Let's help them purify their inner side in the river. It's our own will what cleans us, and that's why we need to be strong. We need to be resilient. We shouldn't judge without listening. We should understand our kids, what they want to say, because otherwise our kids are going to keep quiet and they will take revenge, and don't know how to channel their originality. We have to give them new opportunity so the kids are not afraid to make a mistake. Keep that flowing state, accepts their error as a way of progressing. Very creative people make lots of mistakes, but if we penalize mistakes, they will prevent them, they will avoid them, and they will hinder their creativity. They will feel less, they will feel lower because they make so many mistakes. And look with an eye of hope, and knowing that that kid that gets it wrong, that is sensitive, has a huge potential. And look at them like this, and they were going to have their wings flowing much higher. And we get that also demanding, but not because we are afraid of our kids staying behind, for love, because I love their potential. This is what I wanted to transmit to you, what I wanted to share with you, this idea of sensitive intelligence that we could be talking for much longer. This has just been an initial presentation, a quick presentation of huge Mediterranean Sea that we want to open, going from a closed and rude education to a sensitive education that allows every person to become the best version of themselves. Thank you very much for your attention.